The judge stopped the wedding when she noticed something off about the bride. On a gray Thursday morning in late October, the county courthouse looked almost romantic. Soft drizzle on the windows, rows of wooden benches, a vase of fake white lilies on the clerk's counter. Outside, a small crowd tried to smooth suits and dresses under umbrellas, shaking off the cold. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed quietly over the civil ceremony room on the third floor. And sitting there in her black robe, reading the case file for Gavin and Helen, was Judge Lucy. From what I heard later, this wasn't just another couple on her calendar. It became the case people whispered about in that town for months. Lucy had been a judge for years. She'd seen it all: drunken elopements, last-minute cold feet, couples who bickered through their vows. She was calm, fair, a little intimidating, and she had a reputation for one thing in particular. She read every document. Every single line. Honestly, if you're the kind of person who signs things without looking, she was your worst nightmare. That morning, though, something felt off. She sat behind her small ceremony desk, flipping through the standard forms: license, identification, affidavits. Everything looked fine. Clean. Too clean, actually. No corrections, no hesitation, no mismatched signatures. Almost like someone had rehearsed how the paperwork should look. Her eyes drifted to the small note clipped to the front. Gavin, Helen ceremony. Family attending. Possible press presence. Special request, after vows, judge to read brief statement of commitment, prepared by counsel. Attorney Marcus. She frowned slightly at that last part. A statement of commitment written by the lawyer? Not the couple? Between us, that's the kind of detail Lucy did not like. She sighed, set the folder down, and looked up through the glass panel in the door. On the other side of the hallway, she could see the waiting room filling up. Women in pastel dresses, older men in dark coats, a teenager with headphones half in, half out. Gavin's family, obviously. Old money, but we don't like to call it old money kind of people. Next to the door, a tall man in an expensive navy suit checked his watch and looked towards the elevator. Gavin. Early 40s, well-groomed, salt and pepper hair that magazines call distinguished. He tried to look calm, but he kept smoothing his tie like it might run away. Standing beside him, chatting with one of the clerks, was Attorney Marcus, the one who requested the judge read that statement. Perfect hair, perfect smile, carrying a leather portfolio like it was an extension of his arm. And near the far wall, on a plastic chair, sat a woman in a pale blue dress, legs crossed, clutching a bouquet that looked too big for her hands. Helen. The bride. She wasn't the glitter type. No tiara, no veil, no giant ball gown. Just a fitted white coat over her dress, hair down in soft waves, lips the color of rose tea. Calm. Almost too calm. From what people who were there said, she looked peaceful. But in the way a frozen lake looks peaceful, flat, still, and very hard to read. Behind her sat another woman, a bit younger, with dark red lipstick and a sharp bob haircut. She kept leaning forward to whisper in Helen's ear, occasionally squeezing her shoulder. That was Chelsea, people would say later. The friend. The one who helped plan everything. Lucy watched them through the glass for a moment, thumb resting on the edge of the file. Something fluttered in her chest, like a tiny warning. She'd felt that once before. Years back, there had been a civil ceremony just like this one. Small room, big family, smiling bride. 3 months later, the groom was dead from a random accident. The estate had been transferred neatly to his new wife. All the documents had been perfectly in order. And yet, something in that case had never stopped bothering Lucy. A pattern in the signatures, the way the new widow had spoken during the hearing, the soft little smile when the inheritance was confirmed. There was no proof of wrongdoing. Not enough to charge. But the feeling stuck. Now, watching Helen through the glass, she felt that same cold ripple down her arms. Lucy rubbed her temple. "You're tired," she told herself under her breath. "You've been working too many late nights." She picked up the folder again and forced herself to read the basic information, line by line. Bride, Helen Elise, 36, freelance copywriter. Groom, Gavin, 42, co-owner of a private medical group. Marital status, both single, no prior marriages. Witnesses, Chelsea and Daniel. Nothing unusual. On paper, they were exactly what you'd expect. Mid-30s, second chance at love, grown up enough to know what they wanted. No red stamps, no warnings. Just a neat, tidy life event. Still, when she reached the last page, there it was again. A thin, separate set of documents, clipped to the back. Not part of the standard county packet. Lucy slid them out carefully. They were printed on heavy cream paper, with the medical group's logo faintly watermarked in the background. A title line in bold. Memorandum of Intent and Mutual Protection Agreement. Between Dr. Gavin and Ms. Helen. She scanned the first paragraph. It sounded like a mix of romance and legalese. On the occasion of their lawful union, the parties hereby declare their intention to share assets, responsibilities, and future holdings. Future holdings, she murmured. Her eyes continued down the page. The document allocated certain rights in case of disability, emergency access to medical decisions, that kind of thing. Not completely unheard of, especially with doctors and business owners. But then there was a section that made her pause. In the event of sudden incapacitation or untimely passing of Dr. Gavin within the first year of marriage, the entirety of his shares in the medical group are to be assigned to Ms. Helen, bypassing standard probate channels. Lucy's eyes narrowed. Within the first year. Entirety of his shares. Bypassing standard probate channels. If you're thinking that sounds more like an emergency inheritance funnel than a love declaration, you are not alone. She flipped to the next page. It was a short version of that same agreement, formatted almost like something that could be read out loud. At the bottom, in neat ink, were two signature lines. One for Gavin. One for Helen. Neither signed yet. Just waiting. Lucy let the pages fall back onto her desk. For a moment, she just stared at them. Then she thought of that old case. The widowed bride who cried too perfectly, whose inheritance papers had appeared, prepared in advance to make things easier. The one she still woke up thinking about sometimes. The sensation in her chest turned from flutter to weight. She stood, straightened her robe, and took a slow breath. Outside, the bailiff poked his head through the door. "Judge, the Gavin, Helen party is here. Are you ready for them?" he asked. Lucy nodded, but her voice came out quieter than usual. "Let's bring them in, Tom." The bailiff opened the door, calling the names like a small parade. "Gavin, Helen ceremony. Parties and witnesses inside, please." Chairs scraped. Soft whispers turned into excited murmurs. You know how families get when a wedding is about to start, even a courthouse one. Someone laughed too loudly. Someone shushed a kid. A woman dabbed under her eyes with a tissue, already emotional. Gavin entered first, shoulders squared, trying not to look as nervous as he felt. He walked up to the front with Attorney Marcus close beside him, like a shadow in a designer suit. Helen came next. And this is where almost everyone agrees. The room shifted a little when she stepped in. She wasn't glowing the way brides in big church weddings glow. She was composed. Her eyes took everything in calmly, the benches, the people, the judge. She gave a small polite smile, the kind you give in customer service, not on the happiest day of your life. Chelsea followed so closely behind that if you didn't look carefully, you'd think they were attached. She squeezed Helen's elbow once, whispered, "You're okay. Just breathe," and then took her spot as witness. Everyone settled into their seats. Tom, the bailiff, closed the door. For a second, there was complete silence. Lucy looked at them, at Gavin with his hopeful smile and stiff shoulders, at Helen with that too-still face, at Marcus with his easy charm, and she had that tiny, dangerous thought. If I say nothing, this will be over in 15 minutes. They'll leave happy. I'll never know if I was right to be worried. Honestly, a lot of people would have taken the easy route right there. She didn't. "Good morning," she said, voice steadier now, carrying across the room. "We're here to witness the civil union of Dr. Gavin and Ms. Helen. Marriage is a serious legal and personal commitment. Before we begin, I want to make sure both parties are entering this of their own free will and with full understanding of what today means." Gavin nodded right away. Yes, Your Honor, he said. Absolutely. Helen nodded too, just a fraction later. Yes, Your Honor, she echoed. Lucy didn't miss that millisecond of delay. Narrators like me live for those tiny details, and judges like her use them as data. She picked up the main file, glanced at it like she was following routine, then set it down. Her hand drifted deliberately to the cream-colored pages from Marcus. Before we proceed to the vows, she said calmly, I see there's an additional document attached to today's ceremony. A memorandum of intent and mutual protection agreement. Marcus smiled and stepped forward a little. Yes, Your Honor. Purely symbolic. Just a formal way of reading their commitment out loud. They thought it would be meaningful, given his business and all. Lucy watched him. Symbolic, she repeated. This is a legal agreement, Mr. Marcus. He kept the smile, but it tightened at the edges. Well, yes, of course, he said smoothly. But mainly it reflects what we all know, that they intend to share their lives and assets. Have both parties read this agreement in full? She asked, her eyes switching from him to Gavin, then to Helen. Gavin straightened. I have, Your Honor, he said. Marcus walked me through it. Lucy nodded slowly, then looked at Helen. And you, Miss Helen? The room seemed to hold its breath. Helen's fingers tightened slightly on the bouquet, just enough to bend a few stems. Then she relaxed them. Yes, she said. I've read it. Did anyone pressure you to sign it? Lucy asked. No, Helen said quickly. It was my idea too. I want us both protected. It was a good answer. Too good. Clean, polished, like someone had instructed her on what to say if that question came up. From where she sat, Helen looked completely in control. But if you had been just a bit closer, you would have seen the smallest tremor in her left thumb. The kind of tiny shake that doesn't show up in pictures. Lucy saw it. She didn't look away. Very well, she said. We'll come back to this at the appropriate time. Before we continue, if you love stories that feel like they came straight out of a wedding group chat, subscribe now. Trust me, you don't want to miss the next twist. The ceremony moved into the usual rhythm, words about commitment, choice, the law recognizing their union. Gavin visibly relaxed. This was familiar, expected. He smiled at Helen, and for a moment you could see it. He was really, truly in love. The kind of love that makes intelligent people trust too easily. Helen held his gaze and smiled back. If you only saw them then, you'd think they were just another lucky couple. But Lucy kept seeing flashes, cream paper, old case file, a different man's name, a different bride's tears. At one point, she asked them to join hands. Gavin, do you take Helen to be your lawfully wedded? Wait, she heard herself say, before the next word. The room froze. For a second, even she seemed surprised she'd said it out loud. But once it was out, there was no taking it back. Gavin blinked. Your Honor, he said, confused. Lucy's gaze slid back to the cream document. Her fingers rested on it like it weighed 100 pounds. I apologize, she said, but her voice had changed. There was steel in it now. Before I formalize this union, I need to clarify something for the record. Marcus stepped forward a little more quickly this time. Your Honor, with respect, perhaps any questions regarding the agreement could be handled after. She held up a hand. Mr. Marcus, you requested that I read this agreement as part of the ceremony, she said. That puts it squarely in my jurisdiction today. He shut his mouth. Gavin shifted his weight, glancing between them. A few relatives exchanged worried looks. Chelsea's posture straightened in her chair. She stopped fiddling with her phone and focused fully on the judge. Lucy picked up the memorandum and held it lightly. Dr. Gavin, she said, are you aware that this agreement specifies a complete transfer of your shares to Ms. Helen in the event of your sudden death within the first year of marriage? Gavin frowned. Yes, he said slowly. We talked about me wanting Helen to be secure. My ex, he stopped himself, corrected, my past relationships made me realize I should plan ahead. Lucy nodded once, then looked at Helen. And Ms. Helen, are you aware this document bypasses normal probate processes? That it essentially places you as sole beneficiary over other potential claimants. Now every eye in the room was on Helen. She swallowed once. Yes, she said. That's what we agreed. We don't want legal chaos if something happens. Her voice didn't crack. It didn't quiver. If anything, it was almost too steady. Lucy exhaled slowly through her nose. Do you know why I'm asking these questions? She asked her. No, Your Honor, Helen said, still polite. And that was the moment, from what people told me, when Lucy made her choice. She could have shrugged it off. Accepted the prepared romantic-sounding explanation. Read the little symbolic text, pronounced them husband and wife, and moved on with her docket. Instead, she set the memorandum down very carefully, folded her hands, and looked at the couple like she was seeing straight through the courthouse walls. Because, she said quietly, I saw an almost identical agreement once. Same structure. Same, if anything happens in the first-year clause. Same wording about bypassing probate. She paused just long enough for the silence to thicken. In that case, the groom died less than 3 months after signing it. A murmur rippled through the benches. Gavin's face lost a little color. Helen's joy tightened just enough that you'd miss it if you weren't staring at her. Lucy continued, her voice still controlled. That death was ruled an accident. There was no criminal charge. But the pattern in the paperwork was memorable. She turned her gaze to Marcus. Mr. Marcus, did you draft that previous agreement as well? Something flickered in his expression, the first crack in his polished calm. No, Your Honor, he said. That must have been someone else. These clauses are common in high-asset cases. Standard practice. Is that so? Lucy said. She glanced toward the benches where a few people now whispered nervously. Chelsea had gone completely still, one hand closed tightly around her phone. That's when Lucy did something that officially crossed the line from routine to unforgettable. She closed the main file. She closed the memorandum. And she said, clearly, I'm going to pause the ceremony. Gasps. Real, loud gasps. Someone in the back actually said, what, out loud. Gavin stared at her like she had slapped him. Pause, he repeated. Your Honor, what do you mean pause? Helen's bouquet dipped slightly in her hand. Lucy folded her hands over the closed folder. I mean, she said, that before I sign anything binding today, I need to speak with the two of you alone. Without counsel. Without witnesses. Without anyone else in this room. Marcus was already shaking his head. Your Honor. This is not a request, Mr. Marcus, Lucy cut in. It is my condition for proceeding. You're welcome to wait here with the guests. She turned to Tom. Bailiff, please escort Dr. Gavin and Miss Helen to my chambers. Now. Tom looked as shocked as everyone else, but he nodded. Yes, Judge. Gavin turned to Helen, searching her face. Is this normal? He whispered. No, Helen said quietly. It's not. Their hands were still joined. For a heartbeat, it looked like they might refuse. Might insist on continuing regardless. But then Helen did something small and telling. She squeezed his hand once and murmured, It's okay. Let's just talk to her. Between you and me, that sentence alone could mean a lot of things. They stepped away from the desk, past the front row of stunned family, through the little side door that led to the judge's chambers. Tom held it open, shot Lucy a questioning look. She nodded. When the door clicked shut behind them, the ceremony room erupted in whispers. What is going on? Can she do that? This is insane. Chelsea leaned forward in her chair, eyes fixed on the closed door, fingers drumming fast against her thigh. Marcus stayed near the front, jaw clenched, smile gone. He adjusted his tie once, then again, then stared at the memorandum like it might rearrange itself into something innocent if he glared hard enough. Lucy didn't move for a moment. She just sat there, feeling the weight of a decision she couldn't unmake now. Then she stood, gathered the folder and that cream document, and walked to the side door herself. Whatever happened in her chambers after that, that was the moment everything stopped being just a wedding and started becoming an investigation. I wasn't inside that room, of course. None of us were. But over the weeks that followed, I heard the story so many times from clerks, from deputies, from people who claimed they saw something that eventually the details started to fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. And this is, as far as everyone agrees, what happened once the door closed behind them. Tom, the bailiff, led them down the short hallway, the sound of his shoes echoing on the linoleum. Gavin walked stiffly, jaw tight, like a man bracing for impact even though he didn't know what was coming. Helen walked beside him, bouquet held low, steps even and graceful, too graceful for someone whose wedding had just been stopped. When they reached the judge's chambers, Tom held the door open. Lucy was already inside, standing by her desk, the cream-colored memorandum resting neatly on the blotter. She didn't sit. They entered. The door shut. Tom waited just outside, not too close, but close enough to hear if anything truly went wrong. Inside the room, it was quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your own breathing sound suspicious. Lucy folded her hands behind her back. "Please," she said softly, "have a seat." Gavin obeyed immediately. Helen did too, but slower, with a small hesitation before touching the chair, like she was assessing the entire space. Lucy watched everything. She took her time coming around the desk, not rushing, not dragging it out, but moving with the calm, deliberate precision of someone who already knows 3 moves ahead. When she finally sat, she didn't open the file. She didn't even look at it. She looked at them. "I want to clarify a few things," she said. "This is not an interrogation. You are not suspected of anything." Her tone was warm, almost gentle, but that was the thing about Lucy. Gentleness became a mirror. People showed more of themselves in softness than in force. Gavin nodded quickly, grateful. Helen nodded too, slower. "First," Lucy continued, "I'd like to understand how this agreement came to be. Who suggested drafting it?" Gavin leaned forward a little, hands clasped between his knees. "Well, I did," he said. "Or at least, I brought up the idea. Marcus said it was smart, considering my business structure. I've had issues in the past. I thought being prepared was the adult thing to do." Lucy noted the wording. Issues. Not relationships. Helen kept her face blank, eyes steady on the judge. Lucy turned to her. "And you agreed right away?" There was a half-second delay, tiny, but Lucy lived in the land of tiny. "Yes," Helen said. "We both wanted clarity. No surprises. We didn't want anything messy." "But you didn't sign it beforehand," Lucy said. "No," Helen replied. "We wanted it to be part of the ceremony. Symbolic." Lucy let that sit. Gavin shifted uncomfortably, sensing something he didn't fully understand. "I didn't think it would be a problem," he said quickly. "I thought including the judge made it feel more official." Lucy's eyes flicked toward the document on her desk. She still didn't touch it. "Mr. Marcus drafted this agreement. Correct?" Gavin nodded. "Yes." Lucy didn't look at him. She looked at Helen. "And did you read it in full?" "Every page." "Yes," Helen said instantly. But her fingers tightened on the bouquet, bending one of the stems. Lucy's voice remained soft. "Do you understand all of its implications? Especially the clause involving sudden death?" Gavin exhaled sharply, almost offended. "Helen's not planning my death, Judge." "I didn't say she was," Lucy replied calmly. Helen looked straight at her. "I understand the clause," she said. "It was Gavin's idea. He wanted. It was practical," Gavin interrupted. "Not romantic." I know how it looks." Lucy kept watching Helen, not Gavin. "And did you want it, Helen?" Helen blinked once. Another tiny pause. "Yes," she said. "Of course." Lucy leaned back slightly in her chair, studying her with the same quiet intensity she used on witnesses in custody hearings. "There's something I've learned," Lucy said softly, almost as if thinking aloud. "When someone answers too quickly, I usually assume they've prepared for the question." Helen didn't flinch. But her left thumb trembled again, just barely. "If you have something to say," Lucy added gently, "this would be the safest moment to do it." Gavin turned to Helen, confusion crossing his face. "What does she mean?" "Helen." Helen didn't look at him. For the first time since the morning began, she looked human. Not composed, not frozen like calm, human. Something flickered behind her eyes, something she swallowed down. "I don't know what you want me to say," she whispered. Lucy kept her voice low. "I want you to tell the truth. Not the rehearsed truth. Yours." Helen closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they glistened, not with tears, but with something tighter, more controlled. "I didn't ask for the clause," she said quietly. I didn't want it. Marcus insisted it was standard. Gavin insisted it was safe. And she exhaled. I just agreed so we could stop talking about it. Gavin's face fell. Why didn't you tell me that? Helen finally turned toward him. Because you wanted everything perfect. And every time I questioned something, you thought I was having doubts about the marriage. She shook her head softly. I wasn't. Lucy stayed silent, letting the moment breathe. Gavin stared at Helen like he was seeing her through new glass. Lucy waited. Then she leaned forward just an inch. Helen, she said gently, one more question. And I need you to answer it exactly as you feel it. Helen looked at her. Lucy's eyes were calm. Not accusing, just deeply, almost painfully perceptive. Does this agreement scare you? Lucy asked. Helen's breath caught. And that tiny, fragile sound was the moment Gavin's entire face changed. Because he realized he didn't know the answer. Helen pressed her lips together. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Yes, she said. It does. Gavin inhaled sharply. Lucy nodded once, slow and solemn, as if that single word had confirmed something she had suspected from the moment she saw Helen through the glass. But she didn't triumph. She didn't accuse. She didn't push further. She simply closed the file on the desk. Thank you, she said. I have what I need for now. Outside the door, Tom straightened in alarm because he heard a chair scrape suddenly against the floor, Gavin's. Inside that room, he had stood up so quickly his knee bumped the desk. Helen, why didn't you tell me? He asked, not angry, wounded. Helen didn't answer. Lucy stood too. This doesn't mean the ceremony is cancelled, she said. It simply means I'm not moving forward blindly. She looked at both of them with a steady, neutral expression. I'm giving you space, she said, to speak honestly to each other. Without an audience. Without pressure. Before anything irreversible happens. She stepped toward the door. I'll give you 10 minutes. She opened it. Gavin and Helen stayed seated, frozen between shock and something deeper. Lucy stepped out into the hallway. Tom looked at her wide-eyed. Well, he whispered. Lucy held the folder to her chest. Now, she murmured, we watch. The hallway outside Judge Lucy's chambers felt colder than the rest of the courthouse. Not literally, it was the same cheap air conditioning system humming overhead, but emotionally cold. The kind of cold you feel when you know something is about to go very, very wrong. From what a few people in that hallway said later, the sound coming through the chamber's door wasn't shouting, not yet, but it was tense enough that everyone waiting could feel the ripple. Inside, Lucy stood behind her desk, arms crossed loosely, watching Gavin and Helen sit on the small wooden chairs across from her. Gavin kept glancing at his bride, confusion etched across his face. Helen sat perfectly upright, hands folded tightly on her lap, fingers interlaced so hard her knuckles turned white. Chelsea wasn't allowed inside, of course, that was the whole point, but she was planted right outside the door, pacing like a guard dog with a designer haircut. Every time someone so much as exhaled near her, she snapped her head around sharply, like she was ready to bite. Honestly, if I had to bet on who was going to cause the first scene that day, my money would have been on Chelsea, not the bride. Inside the room, the silence stretched. Lucy finally spoke. Her voice wasn't angry, but it carried a weight that pressed into the air. Before I authorize anything, she said, I need to understand this agreement. And I need to understand the truth behind it. Gavin nodded quickly. Yes, of course, Your Honor. Whatever you need. Helen nodded too, but there was a delay, just like before. A thin delay, but Lucy noticed. She always noticed. She tapped the cream document with her finger. Helen, she said, softer now, why does this clause exist? Why the urgency? Why funnel everything to you within 12 months of marriage? Helen's lips parted. Her breath caught. And for the first time since stepping into the courthouse, she looked fragile. Not guilty. Not manipulative. Just fragile. It's protection, she whispered. We agreed it was protection. Protection from what? Lucy asked gently. Helen blinked fast, like she was trying to keep her eyes from burning. It's complicated. That phrase. Whenever someone says it's complicated inside a courthouse, it is never ever good news. Gavin reached for her hand. Helen? What's going on? She pulled her hand back. Not roughly. Not dramatically. Just enough to say, don't touch this. Not right now. It stunned Gavin so much he froze mid-motion. Lucy leaned forward slightly. Helen, she said, I need you to answer clearly. Are you afraid of something? Silence. But this silence wasn't the cold, elegant type Helen had been carrying all morning. This one trembled. Her shoulders rose and fell in a subtle, shallow breath. She pressed her thumb hard into her palm like she was grounding herself. Then, a soft, broken sound slipped out of her throat. Not a sob. Not yet. More like the first crack traveling through a frozen lake. Lucy didn't push. She let the moment breathe. Finally, Helen whispered, I didn't want this. Not like this. Gavin's head snapped toward her. What do you mean? Helen, talk to me. She squeezed her eyes shut. It wasn't supposed to be today, she murmured. I wasn't ready. I'm not ready for this. Attention. Gavin frowned, confused. What attention? She opened her eyes, and for the first time, her voice carried something raw. Yours. Your family's. Marcus. Everyone watching every move I make like I'm. She stopped herself. Lucy heard the unfinished word loud and clear. Like I'm a threat. But she didn't say it aloud. Instead, Lucy softened her tone even more. Did someone pressure you into signing this agreement? Another silence. Then Helen shook her head. No, that's not it. Then what is it? Gavin asked, sounding almost pleading now. Helen swallowed hard. I can't explain it without. Her voice cracked. I just can't. That single crack was enough. Outside the chambers, something hit the wall, a soft thud, like someone had kicked their shoe into it. Probably Chelsea, losing her patience. Lucy held Helen's gaze. You can speak freely here, she said. No one can use your words against you. I need to know if you are making this choice independently. Helen stared at her hands. Her fingers trembled visibly now. And then, a tear fell. Just one. But for a woman who had been a statue until now, that tear landed like a confession. I didn't want to disappoint anyone, she whispered. Gavin leaned forward. Disappoint who? Me? Helen shook her head, slow and hollow. No, not you. Something in her tone shifted then, something heavier, something that didn't match the sweet, quiet bride image everyone had seen. Lucy caught it instantly. Helen, she said carefully, when you say, not you, who are you talking about? Helen's breath shook. She opened her mouth. Bang. The door swung open so violently that even Gavin flinched. Chelsea stood there, eyes wild, chest heaving like she'd sprinted. I'm sorry, no, I'm not sorry, she snapped. This has gone on long enough. Helen, you don't have to say another word. Lucy's expression hardened. Miss Chelsea, you were instructed to wait outside. Oh, I heard, Chelsea said, stepping further in, ignoring the bailiff behind her. I heard every single thing. And this, she pointed at Helen, her finger trembling. This is not helping her. She's overwhelmed. She doesn't think clearly when she's overwhelmed. Helen looked away. Lucy straightened her shoulders. Miss Chelsea, leave the room. Now. Chelsea's jaw clenched. No, I'm not leaving her alone in here. Not with, she cut herself off abruptly. And that sudden silence? That unfinished sentence? It was worse than if she'd screamed. Lucy caught it instantly. Not with who, Miss Chelsea? She asked quietly. Chelsea froze. Her eyes darted to Helen, then to Gavin, then back to Lucy. No one, she said quickly. I didn't mean. You did, Lucy said. Finish the sentence. Chelsea's throat bobbed. Her eyes widened slightly, fear, not anger. She had slipped. And she knew it. I'm not going anywhere, Chelsea said, softer now, almost desperate. I'm staying with her. Lucy took one step forward. You just revealed something, Miss Chelsea. Something you didn't mean to say. And we're not moving another inch until we address it. Gavin looked between the three women, panic building in his face. Helen, what is going on? Helen's eyes filled again, not with tears this time, but with the unmistakable look of someone who realizes the truth is no longer something she can hold back. And right then, right in the center of that suffocating silence, Helen whispered, "Chelsea, please, stop talking." Chelsea closed her eyes. Too late. The damage was done. And that tiny, terrified sentence was the crack that changed the entire investigation. The bailiff stepped between Chelsea and the desk, one palm raised, trying to push her gently back toward the hallway. She didn't move. Her heels dug into the floor like she was rooted there, anchored by pure adrenaline and fear. Judge Lucy stood tall behind her desk, but something in her expression shifted. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even annoyed. She was watching Chelsea the way a surgeon watches a vital sign that suddenly flickers. Gavin looked from Lucy to Helen, from Helen to Chelsea, as if searching for a single coherent explanation in any of their faces. "Someone needs to tell me what's going on," he said quietly. His voice didn't break, but it came close. Chelsea ignored him completely. Instead, she stared directly at Lucy with a kind of fierce protectiveness that bordered on frantic devotion. "Helen does not owe you an explanation," she said. "She doesn't owe anyone anything." Lucy let out a slow exhale. "Miss Chelsea, this is a legal proceeding," she said. "If Miss Helen is entering this marriage under pressure, coercion, or misinformation, I am legally obligated, to intervene." Chelsea scoffed loudly, eyes sharp with defiance. "Oh, please. You're twisting things. She's overwhelmed, that's all. She gets like this when people push her. She shuts down." Helen's shoulders flinched. Not dramatically, just a faint, involuntary twitch. Lucy caught it. Of course she did. She turned her gaze to Helen. "Is that true?" she asked slowly. "Do you shut down when people push you?" Helen's breath stuttered again. Her hands twisted together in her lap, squeezing so hard the veins on the back of her hand stood up. Her voice fell away. Chelsea stepped closer, one arm partly outstretched like she was preparing to shield Helen with her whole body. "Don't answer that," she snapped. Gavin frowned deeply at her. "You don't get to decide what she answers." Chelsea shot him a glare sharp enough to cut. "You don't know her." "Not like I do." It was the first truly venomous thing she had said that day, and it landed like a warning. Lucy leaned back slightly, studying Chelsea with a new, sharper curiosity. "I see," she murmured. Chelsea bristled. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," Lucy said quietly, "that you're exhibiting behavior consistent with someone trying to control the narrative." Chelsea let out a short, humorless laugh. "Spare me. I'm trying to protect her." Lucy tilted her head. "From whom?" That question dropped like a stone in the middle of the room. Helen's eyes snapped up, wide, panicked. "Chelsea," she whispered, voice thin as paper, "please, stop." Chelsea froze. Not from guilt, from the sudden realization that Helen was slipping away from her grip. "There is nothing to stop," Chelsea said slowly, forcing a smile. "You're just tired. You didn't sleep. We talked about this. We said today might be overwhelming." Lucy's brow furrowed slightly. "We." The word was soft, but it carried weight. Chelsea's smile faltered. Helen shut her eyes again, like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Gavin leaned toward her. "Helen," he said quietly, "you're scaring me." That sentence hung in the air with a painful kind of honesty. Helen opened her eyes, and for the first time, she looked at him with something other than politeness or politeness-shaped fear. She looked at him with sorrow. Deep, bone-level sorrow. "Gavin," she whispered, "I never wanted to hurt you." He swallowed hard. "Hurt me how?" Before she could answer, Chelsea cut in sharply. "She's not hurting you. She's protecting you." Everyone looked at her. Even the bailiff paused. "Protecting him?" Lucy repeated. "From what?" Chelsea's jaw snapped shut. Too late. The words had escaped. The damage was already done. Lucy stepped around the desk, standing closer now, voice low and firm. "Miss Chelsea," she said, "I need you to tell me right now what you meant by that." Chelsea's pulse visibly jolted at her throat. "Nothing," she said, too fast. "Nothing. It's just a figure of speech." "It wasn't a figure of speech," Lucy said. "It was an admission." Chelsea shook her head violently. "You're twisting it. You always twist everything." Lucy didn't respond to the insult. She didn't need to. Instead, she looked again at Helen. Helen, she said softly, if you are afraid of someone, or something, you need to say so. You are safe in this room. That was the moment everything tightened. Helen's shoulders lifted in a shaky breath. Her thumb rubbed the inside of her palm, a small, repetitive movement, as if she were trying to quiet something inside herself. Chelsea whispered urgently. Don't. Helen, don't say anything else. Please. It wasn't anger this time. It wasn't control. It was fear. Real fear. Helen lowered her gaze to the floor, tears dropping silently onto her pale blue dress. Then she whispered, barely audible. I'm not afraid of Gavin. That alone was enough to make Gavin exhale in relief. But then she said the second part. I'm afraid of what happens if I don't marry him. The room went silent. Even the air felt held in place. Gavin blinked, stunned. Helen, what are you talking about? Chelsea let out a soft, strangled sound. Something between a gasp and a curse. Lucy did not look away. Who, she asked quietly, are you afraid of? Helen pressed her shaking hands together like she was holding herself still by force. And then, with a voice so small, so broken, so terrified it barely existed at all, she said, my sister. Chelsea went absolutely still. Her face drained of color. Lucy's eyes sharpened, watching every micro-expression. Gavin stared at Helen in disbelief. You told me you were an only child, he whispered. Helen sobbed once, a tiny, shame-filled sound. I know, she said. I had to. Chelsea stepped backward, as if the confession had physically pushed her. Lucy didn't move. Helen, she said gently, tell me what your sister has to do with this marriage. Helen looked up at her with an expression that broke something in everyone watching. She said. Her breath trembled. She said if I don't go through with the wedding. She looked at Gavin, really looked at him, with an apology so deep it hurt to witness. Someone in this room will get hurt. Gavin's face drained to white. Chelsea closed her eyes, defeated. And Lucy? She finally understood. This wasn't a bride running a scheme. This wasn't a gold digger scam. This wasn't even about the legal agreement. This was a hostage situation wearing wedding clothes. By the time Helen finished talking, the room felt smaller. Not physically, emotionally. Like every word she'd spoken had used up the oxygen. Gavin didn't move. Lucy didn't either. And then Helen said the sentence none of them were prepared for. She told me Gavin was sick. Gavin blinked hard. Sick? Helen, what are you talking about? Helen wiped another tear from her cheek, her fingertips trembling. She said you were hiding it. That you didn't want anyone to know. That's why everything had to be fast. The wedding. The documents. She said you were running out of time. Gavin looked at Lucy, not for help, but for confirmation that this was actually happening. Judge, he whispered, I'm not sick. Lucy's eyes narrowed. Who told you this, Helen? Chelsea? Helen nodded slowly. She made it sound so serious. She said she had proof. She said she'd seen your medical reports. Gavin slammed his palm onto the desk, the loudest sound that room had heard all day. I have no medical reports. Helen, I'm perfectly healthy. I've never. Why would she tell you that? And for the first time since the ceremony began. Helen finally looked confused. Not scared. Not rehearsed. But genuinely confused. I don't know, she said. I thought she was trying to protect me. Lucy leaned forward, voice quiet but firm. Helen, what exactly did Chelsea say? Word for word. Helen swallowed. She said, men like him never tell the truth until it's too late. She said the agreement was the only way to make sure I wouldn't be left with nothing after he died. Lucy's jaw locked. That was it. That was the break in the pattern she'd been waiting for. Gavin, she said, has anyone ever discussed your death, your estate, or your medical condition with Chelsea? Never, he said. I barely know the woman. Lucy nodded, and then something happened. Something small. Something almost invisible. But judges don't miss invisible things. Helen's eyes shifted. Not sideways. Not downward. Backward. Toward the door. Lucy turned exactly in that direction. And that's when they heard it. A soft click. The sound of the doorknob, the one leading to the hallway, slowly returning to place. Someone had been listening. Right behind the door. Someone who wasn't supposed to hear any of this. Lucy stood instantly. "Tom," she shouted. The bailiff appeared from the outer office almost before she finished saying his name. "Yes, Judge." "Who just left this hallway?" Tom looked confused. "I didn't see anyone." Lucy didn't believe that for 1 second. She walked to the door, opened it sharply, and leaned into the hallway. Empty. Too empty. Helen stood up, now shaking in a way that looked different, less fear, more dread. "Judge," she whispered. "She wouldn't leave without me. Chelsea never leaves without me." Lucy turned to Helen. "Helen," she said softly, "where does she go when she feels cornered?" Helen closed her eyes, then answered in a breath so small it was barely sound. "Somewhere she can make the first move." And that's when Gavin finally understood what Lucy had understood 20 minutes earlier. Chelsea wasn't running away. She was preparing. And whatever she was preparing for, it wasn't good. Lucy didn't wait for anyone to sit. She shut the chamber door, walked straight to her desk, and picked up her landline phone. "Security," she said. "I need a live check of the third-floor hallways. A woman just exited my chambers without authorization." Gavin stood beside Helen, one hand hovering near her shoulder, not touching her, but close, like he wasn't sure if comfort was still allowed. Helen wasn't crying anymore. Now she just looked hollow, like someone had scooped something out of her. Lucy hung up the phone and faced her head-on. "Helen," she said, voice firm but not unkind, "I need you to tell me everything. Every detail. What Chelsea told you, what she showed you, what she planned." Helen squeezed her hands together, knuckles bone white. She said, Helen began slowly, that Gavin had an inheritance problem. That his family would fight me if anything happened. That I needed to protect myself. "A problem?" Gavin repeated. "What problem?" "We're barely engaged." Helen shook her head, a tiny, defeated motion. "She made it sound like your family hated me. She said they'd drag me through court. She said I'd be left with debt. She said," Helen's voice cracked. "I was stupid. I believed her." Lucy didn't flinch. "You were manipulated," she corrected. "That's different." Helen stared at the floor. "I let her guide everything. The timing. The documents. The wording. I thought she was helping me. She kept saying women like us need to look out for each other." Lucy exchanged a quick look with Gavin. She had heard that kind of motto before, weaponized empathy. "What about Gavin's health?" she asked. Helen swallowed. "She told me he was hiding test results. That he had, maybe 6 months. She said she'd overheard someone from the medical board talking about it." Gavin's expression turned from confused to horrified. "What?" "Helen, I don't even have a medical condition." "She showed me emails," Helen whispered. "From a hospital account." Lucy's eyes sharpened. "Do you still have them?" Helen froze. Slowly, she reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Her hands shook as she swiped. She turned the screen toward Lucy. And that was the exact second the story shifted again. Because the emails were flawless. They looked real. They used the correct formatting. Correct headers. Correct doctor signatures. Except for one thing. The dates were impossible. Lucy tapped the screen. "Helen, this doctor retired 2 years ago. I know because I approved the pension paperwork myself." Helen covered her mouth. "Oh my God." Gavin leaned forward. "She faked everything," he said. "Everything." Lucy nodded. "Someone put a significant amount of effort into making you believe a lie." Helen looked up at Lucy. Not frantic. Not defensive. Just scared. "Judge, why? Why would she do all that?" And Lucy didn't answer. Not because she didn't know, but because she didn't want to say it before she was sure. Before she could respond, Tom knocked once and entered. "Judge," he said. Security checked the cameras. A woman matching the witness description exited the building through the east stairwell. No badge. No checkout. She left the courthouse entirely. Helen's knees buckled slightly. Gavin grabbed her elbow to steady her. Lucy closed her eyes for a moment, just long enough for a single thought to settle. Then she opened them. And the steel was back. "Tom, no one leaves this floor unless I approve it. We're escalating this." He nodded and stepped out. Helen looked between them, panicked, but trying to process. Am I in trouble?" she whispered. Lucy shook her head. No, but you're in danger. Helen's face drained of color. Gavin stepped closer, protective now in a way he hadn't been allowed to be all morning. Lucy continued. Helen, I don't think Chelsea wanted you to marry Gavin. Helen blinked. But she planned everything. That was the point, Lucy said. She wanted control. Over the timing. The documents. The witnesses. Helen felt her throat close. Why? Why would she care? Lucy hesitated only for a second. Then she said it. Because I don't think she was planning something to happen after the wedding. She paused. I think she was planning for something to happen during it. Gavin stiffened. Helen, Lucy continued gently, did your friend ever say anything about today? Anything unusual? Helen nodded slowly. She said that after today, everything would shift. That I'd finally be free. That this would be the last time I ever had to worry about money. Lucy exchanged a look with Gavin. A very dark look. Then she said the sentence that makes listeners freeze when they hear the story. Helen, she didn't intend for you to become Gavin's wife. She exhaled. She intended for you to become Gavin's widow. The room went silent. The kind of silent that only comes when people finally understand the thing they've been trying not to understand. And as the last words left Judge Lucy's mouth, the silence in that small chamber felt suddenly fragile, like glass on the edge of breaking. Gavin stared at Helen as if seeing something he wasn't sure he wanted to understand. Chelsea froze. Lucy waited steady, unblinking, giving Helen one final chance to tell the truth. And Helen. She opened her mouth. But before a single word came out, someone knocked sharply on the chamber door. Once. Twice. Urgent. The sound cut straight through the room, and every face turned toward it at the same time. Lucy's expression hardened. Whatever was waiting on the other side of that door was about to change everything. The knock on the chamber door hit the room like a shockwave. Sharp. Urgent. Enough to make Helen flinch and Gavin straighten in his chair. Judge Lucy lifted her eyes slowly. Come in, she said. The door cracked open, and Officer Barnes stepped halfway inside. People who knew him later said he was normally unshakable, but not today. His posture was tense, his expression pale. Judge, he said, voice low. We just received a call downstairs. Anonymous. They claim someone in this room is attempting to leave the courthouse with forged legal documents. Helen gasped softly. Gavin looked confused. And Chelsea, well, according to the clerks who were lingering outside, her whole body seemed to freeze. Lucy stayed impossibly calm. What exactly did the caller say? Barnes hesitated for a beat. They said the person wasn't who she claimed to be. The room went dead silent. Witnesses told me it was the kind of silence that feels like the floor drops out beneath you. The kind that changes the atmosphere in a way no one forgets. Chelsea's breathing turned shallow. You didn't need to be in the room to know she felt cornered. Everyone who recounted this moment said the panic was written all over her. Lucy kept her eyes on Barnes. Thank you. Stay close. He nodded, stepped back, and kept the door partially open. Then, with the kind of focus only someone with decades of experience has, Lucy turned toward Helen. Miss Helen, she said gently, is there something you want to tell Dr. Gavin before we continue? Helen's lips trembled. People who heard her describe this moment later said she looked like someone who'd been holding her breath for years, and it was finally catching up to her. I didn't want this, she whispered. Gavin leaned slightly forward. Want what? Helen wiped her eyes, her hands shaking. Chelsea told me I needed protection, she said, her voice breaking. She said your family would never let you marry me unless I had leverage. I was scared. I let her talk me into something I didn't understand. Gavin stared at her like he wasn't sure whether to be angry or heartbroken. She told you that, he asked. Chelsea did. Before Helen could answer, Chelsea shot up from her chair. She's twisting everything, she shouted. I was helping her. Lucy didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Miss Chelsea, she said, remain seated. Chelsea didn't sit. She looked around the room like every exit was suddenly too far away. Lucy continued in that same steady tone. One of the signatures on this agreement does not match Ms. Helen's verified signature. According to what staff said later, the moment she said that, Chelsea's face drained of color. Helen shook her head violently. I didn't sign anything with those terms. I swear I didn't. Gavin looked at the paper, then at her. You really didn't? No, Helen whispered. I never would have agreed to that. Lucy turned her attention to Chelsea. Miss Chelsea, did you forge this signature? Chelsea's voice cracked. I did it for her. She's too trusting. I was trying to protect her from being used. People told me it wasn't anger in her voice. It was desperation. Gavin stood, breath shaky. You forged an inheritance agreement before my wedding? She deserves something. Chelsea cried. Your family would chew her up and spit her out. I wasn't going to let that happen. Helen covered her face, sobbing. Those who saw her said she looked completely shattered, not angry, not defensive, just devastated. Lucy looked at Officer Barnes. Please escort Miss Chelsea downstairs for questioning regarding document fraud. Chelsea backed up toward the wall, tears streaming down her face. No, Helen, please. Say something. Say I did it for you. But Helen didn't look up. She didn't speak. And that silence told the entire room everything they needed to know. Barnes took Chelsea by the arm and guided her out. Her screams echoed down the hallway. And then the door closed. The room felt heavier after that. Still. Almost unbearably quiet. Lucy set the file aside and folded her hands. Dr. Gavin, she said softly, I cannot continue this ceremony today. Gavin's face collapsed, not in anger, but in heartbreak. Helen whispered, Gavin, I didn't know she forged anything. I didn't know what she added. I was scared. I let her control the details because I was terrified of losing you. Witnesses later said Gavin's expression softened just slightly, the kind of softness that comes from realizing the person you love is flawed, but not malicious. He took a shaky breath and told her, We're going to talk. Not now. Not here. But we're going to talk. Helen nodded through tears. And then something small, but symbolic, happened. As they stood to leave the chamber, Helen's bouquet slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a dull, soft sound. She didn't pick it up. Neither did he. They walked out together, not married, not broken up, but standing in the wreckage of something they didn't fully understand yet. And according to everyone who watched them go, it was impossible to tell whether they were walking toward a future together or walking away from one. Sometimes the biggest threat to a relationship isn't the enemy in front of you, but the friend standing too close behind you. And sometimes love survives not because everything goes right, but because you finally face the truth you were terrified to speak. Real commitment isn't about contracts, leverage, or protection. It's about honesty, especially when it's the hardest thing to offer. If you want more wedding drama, family secrets, and stories that make you whisper, no way, hit subscribe. Bridal Confessions has many more secrets to tell. Thank you for watching.